Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Voice of Geeks Network. And today we are going to talk about Final Fantasy 16. And finally, now that we're about a month and a half after the release of the game, talk about some impressions post game. So I'm Rob Roberts from Orange Lounge Radio at the Voice of Geeks Network. And joining me is a familiar face around the network. Used to host a show here called Ranger Pride, Pokestop Podcast. You know him from his frequent calls to OLR. Say hello to Shane.
Hello.
Hi, Shane. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Since our last video, I'm mostly over COVID.
That's
At
good to
least
hear.
the stuff that you can hear still
Yeah.
have all like the fun lingering things, but I can talk, and that's an improvement.
Okay, and if you want to hear more about how Shane got COVID, go check out in our YouTube archives over at YouTube VOG Network. That's VOG Network. Go check out the video all about Final Fantasy 14 FanFest. But today we're going to talk about another game that the 14 team mostly worked on is Final Fantasy 16. So Shane, as usual, and I'm gonna try my best to like play the game a little bit here as we're talking tonight. So wish me luck with all this because I don't have sound or anything because we're doing this, but I will do my best, but I want to get the too long didn't read part out at first as I usually do. So Shane, what was like your favorite and highlights and lowlights of Final Fantasy 16 now that all is said and done? What would be your quick and dirty like review of the game?
Forgettable soundtrack, but amazing story and gameplay
Okay.
is what I would just keep it brief.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I would say probably the really good stuff is that it has a great story, especially the beginning. Although it does keep up the energy. Like sometimes I feel like the story is kind of like ups and downs, it's waves. Like there's these really intense parts, and then there's some what I'd call filler episodes. But overall, this felt like the season of a really good television show that I really enjoyed. Some of the things I didn't enjoy, as much as I found I didn't mind the action-based combat in the game. One of the things that really irritated me was how they really kind of cut out a lot of other things you expect in Final Fantasy games and basically traditional RPGs, and that is the shop mechanic and the crafting mechanic kind of fell by the wayside because the team had all of these other, I guess, visions for the game. Not that it was necessarily like a terrible thing at the end of the day, but I just it was weird that it's like why put in crafting at all when it's gonna really feel kind of half-assed at the end of the day. I think was kind of my thoughts on the whole thing. So
Yeah, I would say a lot of the systems in the game felt unnecessary
mm,
and that they were added because other big games do them.
mm,
Um, because, I mean, for example, you'll run around and you'll see something sparkling on the ground. You go and pick it up. It's 2 gil. That does
exactly. I'm
nothing
doing
for
that
you.
right now. Is I'm going to go pick
Yeah,
something up, and it's going to be a
yeah.
sharp fang, which I probably have 5,000 of those in my inventory. So yeah, it doesn't feel like this ultimately ends up going anywhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the systems are underbaked that are not just straight up the combat system.
And there's nothing to spend gil on that isn't like the orchestricians,
Yeah,
ultimately, is what
the
it feels like.
orchestrions are and the accessories, which some of the accessories I guess are pretty decent. All the accessories I ever used were found in treasure chests or
Mhm,
just given to me.
mhm,
And there was a total of 2 times that I bought crafting materials,
mhm.
and it wasn't even like, oh, I need a whole bunch. It's like, oh, I'm 10 short. That's it.
I felt like I did crafting sometimes, like, especially after I did a mission or, like, a side quest where it was like, "You have, upgradable things," but I never felt like I was super challenged to find any of the material because either it comes from a hunt or, like, you just got it through the story or, like, all the sparkle things you pick
Yes.
up. Like, it didn't really feel like there were things I was doing for the intent of crafting. Like, say, in Final Fantasy 14, if you want to get into crafting in 14, there's, like, a whole little side mini game for that. So
Well, and in this game, the crafting amounts to kind of what you were saying. After you beat like a main story quest, is I guess what I'll call them. Um, you can go almost every time, I'd say, if not every time, you go to the blacksmith, which is your only source of crafting. You go to the blacksmith and you can usually make a weapon upgrade a weapon, make like a bracers, upgrade a bracers, and I've got, it's been like a month since I played this game, so I don't remember all the different slots. But there's like three things that you can make and three things that you can upgrade every time. You
Mhm.
can't make any potions. Uh, oh, and that's where it ends because that's literally the entire game. It's those three items and your potions, and that's it. And you can only make your gear. You cannot make potions, which is something that you probably will be using from time to time and would benefit the most from actually being able to be crafted.
You know what? This whole discussion reminded me that's something I wanted to do in the game was go spend all my gil by buying all these orchestrions or however it's pronounced, the orchestra rolls from the various vendors because like I literally did not spend my gil on anything else in this game. So it was really just those vendors. Why did I think this was an actual town when it's actually
Yeah,
one of
it's
like
not.
the abandoned areas? Oh well, that's fine. Um, so let's talk a little bit about some of the components of the game in depth. And I think the biggest component we should probably talk about is the story. So how did you feel about Final Fantasy 16's plot story? Like what was the good and the bad, I guess?
Um, the good was almost everything. And jumping ahead or saying it too late, but I do, for me personally, and I know it's not everyone, but I feel like this is even with all of my complaints, it's a 10 out of 10 game.
Hmm.
So you're not going to hear me give it a lot of hate, or if I give it like some negative comments, it's not enough to affect my overall like opinion of the game. So negatively for the story, Barnabas's storyline was just kind of boring. Uh
I'd agree with that.
which
I became a
which
little
was a
disengaged.
shame.
Yeah.
Because they did kind of try to set him up as like a secondary villain or like the henchman to like the main villain, and
Hmm.
it fell flat.
Yeah.
I was also disappointed in Benedicta's storyline, if only because I wanted her in the game more. I thought
Yeah,
she was
I
a
was sad to
great
see her go
character.
so early. I thought they were gonna do something to bring her back, and so I was a little disappointed that, she was out of it so early.
Yeah. Um I think those are my real major negatives to the story because I liked the flow of it having like really high highs and kind of leveling off for a bit, and then you go back up to those really high highs, and then you're doing some side quests that are just kind of building the world up, but not necessarily like as extreme as like the Bahamut fight or something.
Right.
That stuff was great to me. It really it made it feel like a roller coaster because you're not always climbing up and then going straight down. You've got to have the momentum to get to other places too, just because you'll probably have a heart attack or something. Um, the great parts of the story, uh, I just the overall story itself was fantastic. It starts out as Clive trying to avenge his brother's death and then morphs into a story about freeing the land from its dependence on these crystals that are, you're told, draining the land of like its life. And then those both come together like I'd say halfway through when you find out, who quote unquote killed Joshua, and then when Joshua is not dead,
Mhm.
um, and then it just kind of takes off from there. I I loved having an actual honest to goodness gay character in the game finally. Like you can say whatever you want about 13 and Vanille and Thing, but it's never addressed in that game. It's confirmed in this game. There's not only like one of the best characters in Dion and then Terrence with him, but there's also uh, some NPCs that talk about being in a relationship. I would say it's very easy to just assume Luber in Dalamil is also, um, and the fact that every single one of those characters were not villains and were portrayed heroically was a complete shock to me that happened. Like there it was not ambiguous. These were good heroic characters.
Yeah, and it's no secret, here at Vog Network that both you and I are gay, and so that, representation in a game is a great thing to see. Like, people want to see themselves in games. Gaming is for everyone, and so we want to see all types of people in games, which is, to be fair, to go back to a point when this game first came out, why, the fact that they don't have any people of color in the game specifically. I should say specifically, because some could argue that there's brown people
Yeah,
in the game but
yeah,
not
the
so much.
Dollar Mill people are
Yeah,
definitely
but
not just
de-
pure white people.
definitely black and indigenous people of color are not represented in this game, which
Mhm.
has been a point we've talked about before on the network. I don't want to overlook it or bypass it, because it is one of those things where I was like, I do feel like they could have. I understand with the whole, the branded people, there's some very, slavery tones to it, and there were some optics that I think Square Enix and the team were really trying to avoid. And so I'm like, kind of like, I see why the decision was made. I don't necessarily agree with the decision, because I feel like there's other ways. Like, there's other, characters that I think are disconnected from that part of the game that they could have considered, making a little more diverse. And I think the game would have been that much better for it. But it is what it is at this point, I guess. I feel like that's maybe one of those things that they can correct if they make a sequel to the game, which is something I would actually really like to see. I would love, love, love to see a 16-2 happen, because I feel like very similar with Final Fantasy 13. And I liked 13 more, I think, than most people when that game first came out. But with Final Fantasy 13 2, it corrected so much of what I think the problems people had with the original game. Like, some of the tunnel style maps, were changed. You had a lot more open areas. You had actual towns in 13 2, and I don't want to make this about 13, but I still feel like there's precedent, within Square to like have another game in basically the same engine with the same battle system that could really perfect, I think, a lot of things that we started seeing in this game.
The problem with that is, and I don't know when we're going to start talking about the ending, but the ending does
Well, talking
not
about the story,
really.
do it.
Okay, well, the ending does not lend itself to make a sequel game set in this time period or
Right.
the credits time period.
But
Um,
you'd mentioned you'd love to see a spin-off game with Dion, and as far as
oh
I'm
yeah, because
concerned,
yeah, he's
w
alive to
we
me.
never saw a
So
severed head, so Dion
he's
is
like the only
potentially
character we
alive.
never saw a body for.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's alive, Terrence is alive, the little girl is alive, so they can have their own adventures. It could be like a Sims game. It's
Right.
fine.
Before I was talking about, some of the things I'd like to see corrected in the sequel, we were talking about representation. And that's because, and I remembered I wanted to ask you about Dion and Terrence and that relationship and how it was portrayed, because I know one thing I really enjoyed was that the game put that so late into the game. Not that I'm saying it should always be that way, but in some ways, I don't really want to use the word gotcha either, but it was such a pleasant surprise. And I think there's so many people after playing the demo, the prologue to this game, that went out and posted like, "Oh, best Final Fantasy ever." There's those people on social media. And not that I should care about what those people think, but it is kind of satisfying to know there were certainly some people out there that went, "Oh, this is the best Final Fantasy ever." Whereas if that scene had been in the opening, they would have cast a certain judgment on this game without giving it a fair shot. And the way they did that in this game with portraying that relationship was, it was a very natural, like, it was just a thing that happened that's part of the story. And that's how it should be. It's just some people are gay. That's it. But you know how it goes online sometimes, right? That some people are going to be like, "Oh, Final Fantasy's woke," all this stuff, where it's like, it's not. It's about allowing all gamers to help see themselves in the game, and that was one way, at least for, LGBTQIA plus population, to see themselves reflected in the game. I don't know.
Uh, yeah, I also would say that it was put. I mean, I would say it's only like a third. Like, so that's not too
It
late. It's
feels
not
like it was
at
way
the
late in the game, but yeah, that's fair. It's fine.
um but I think it's because they chose. I mean, this is Clive's story. This
Mhm.
this is his game. Nobody else. I mean, all the supporting characters they matter, but nobody else matters. This is
Right.
his point of view. Everything has to happen to him. So, I mean, you just even Dion isn't shown till that point really either. So there was no real need for it to be any time sooner.
Mhm. Um, what else do I wanna ask about the story related
Oh,
stuff?
I
Oh,
do want to say in
finally ran
terms
out
of
of Gil.
representation
Oh, yeah.
also,
Mhm.
they didn't do a great job overall with women. I
Mm.
do think they could have done something better. I think Jill is a fine character who is not a damsel in distress, even though you know what you do save her like twice. But
Yeah,
she she just kind of loses steam, I would say. She
yeah,
just
her
becomes less
not being a
relevant as
part
it
of the
goes
ending
on.
kinda sucked. Her not well, I mean, sorry, the ending sequence of the game, you know what I mean? Like,
Well,
her not being a
it
part of
made
that kinda
sense.
sucked.
It
Yeah, but
made
that doesn't mean
sense.
it felt good.
No, but it made sense because he did take her powers on that naked beach scene. So she would not be able to turn into Shiva anymore. So she would be kind of a hindrance. Same, I mean, he didn't take Torgal's powers. They should have taken Torgal, but whatever. Um, but I mean, you kill off Benedicta pretty quick.
Right.
Jill, at varying times, is good to just kind of there. And then Mid is a great side character, but she's not somebody that you fight with, so she's not really in the forefront that much. And I can't remember the healer lady's name. She was fine, her quests were fine. And then you've got Karen, who honestly,
Taya's the healer you're thinking of.
oh, okay, yeah. And then Karen, I mean, she's the shopkeeper, and that's
You're
all her
forgetting
role really
history lesson
is.
lady.
Oh yeah, Vivian, I think her name is.
Yeah.
She's fine. But again, these characters all serve Clive's story,
Mhm.
and because it's Clive's story, they don't shine as much as I think they should.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that for all the male characters, but I would say that for all the female characters.
Yeah, and you bring up one of my big problems with the story, and I hated the Jill and Clive romance, and I know not everybody's going to agree with me on this, but I
I, I
really
I hated it at first, and then I was fine with it by
nope.
the end.
I by the when that naked beach scene happened, which I know some people consider like, oh my gosh, this is the most epic love thing that's ever been in a Final Fantasy game, which I think Final Fantasy X would say hello. But I really feel like that whole thing was it creeped me out because in the beginning they really are setting it up like, oh, they're like brother and sister, and so for them to fall in love because from the story's perspective, it seemed like she's the only woman around. Like, let's just be real. Like, it just felt weird. And it just felt kind of gross. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying that people who aren't like friends can't like ultimately like fall in love and all this stuff, but it felt very forced in this game, and just kind of like one of those. Why did it have to go like that? Like, why can't he just have a female friend and they're friends and they're that's like his wingman travel buddy, type of thing? Like, why does it have to be, you know sex on the beach to get her Shiva powers? It just I didn't like that at all. That was honestly my biggest problem with the story, was the romance.
I
Sorry.
think the hang up for me, at least at the beginning, was because of one of the active time lore entries that stated they
Yeah.
were like siblings. If that one line wasn't in there, I think it would have been something I wouldn't even thought about like at
I
all
don't
throughout the game. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
that makes sense, whatever.
I don't think it would have bugged me as much, but I think, as you point out, how, there could have been some more front of the pack women in the game, right? There could have been some more like leading women in the game, right? That type of thing. I think because it felt like, oh, because she's the one woman that we didn't kill off, right off, fairly early into the game, like, oh, Clive has to fall in love with her. There's no one else left. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. Like, and on it, why not gender fuck one of the primals? There would have been nothing wrong, like if they wanted to say make well, Leviathan is straight up missing from the game, but like, I know Leviathan has been, I think most people would say, oh, Leviathan's probably male, but why not do Lady Leviathan? I don't think there's anything wrong with gender flipping. Even some characters like Shiva, there's been artistic interpretations of what a male, Shiva summon might look like, or a female Ramu and so forth. So I don't know. I feel like, why did it have to be her, the childhood friend? Is it because she's literally the only other woman in the story that's still alive? It's just weird. Nah.
Yeah, I guess.
All right.
Like I said, I came around at the end. I was fine with it.
Yeah,
So
I guess. All right. So what else do we want to bring up with the game? What about the controversial battle system? What did you think of
I
the
love it.
battle system? Yeah, I
Absolutely
like it
love it.
too.
I got so worried about the game in advance. Like I was on board, and then they said the Devil May Cry person was doing it, and that concerned me because I had come off of Stranger of Paradise. So it's like, oh, this battle system's fun. I can do an action game, but I knew once I heard the Devil May Cry guy was doing it that was like like a huge step up from the battle system in Stranger of Paradise.
Mhm.
So I was concerned, and then the demo came out, and I was like, "Nah, this is pretty fun. I'm gonna be fine."
Yeah.
And it was. I literally every time I went to a new map, I would clear the map. I would kill everything there. I did all the hunts. I did all the time trial things, or not time trials. No, I guess they are time trials. The time trials around the world. I still haven't gone back to like the new Game Plus mode yet, so I can get my platinum. But I really enjoyed the combat. I kept it no helper accessories. I just tried to do everything on my own, and I got through the game, and that actually felt pretty like satisfying, like a pretty good accomplishment.
I loved the accessories, although it's funny because now, like, I'm trying to do this arcade mode. I'm like, okay, what can I play on stream that's interesting to look at? And it's telling me I can't use the accessories in arcade mode. But that's probably because they're ranked or
It's
whatever, that whole
bored,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I get it. I just don't like it. So.
And the combat, um, the way they incorporate the different icon like abilities is really cool too.
Mhm.
And how you can mix and match at certain points depending on if you like upgrade and stuff. Uh, by the end, I would say, especially because I went and did all those time trials that force you into only one icon set of abilities each time.
Mhm.
I would say none of the icon powers really felt useless.
Right.
I think the only one I struggle with by the end was Odin's, and I think
Oh
that's just
yeah. I
because
don't care for
I
Odin's.
didn't get as much time with it because it's the last one you get.
Mhm.
So I just didn't have the practice with it. But I guess like people say they really want a party system, and I struggle with this combat how you would incorporate a party system like well,
Yeah.
because how do you just give the party members to the AI because that's what they already do at different points in this game, or do you have a method to swap in between them? Well, that's going to interrupt the flow of the combat, which is really why the combat shines. So I don't know what the correct answer for that is because you're not going to be able to do both.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the combat system. I understand why people are concerned that the game is kind of far gone from the original, turn-based, action, what do they call that when they first debuted it in Final Fantasy IV, like the live battle system type of thing.
Active time
That's it,
battle.
active time battle. I understand why people are upset that they moved away, kind of from that a little bit, because that was the gameplay I think a lot of people enjoyed. But if you think about it, we have not had active time battle since Final Fantasy X was the last time that we had a form of that, right? 11
Mm,
obviously online, 12,
12.
but 12 still kind of played out very, very live, like, and you were moving around. It still had a little more action in it. You know what I mean? It
Well,
was a
it's still
little,
the active time battle system in that you queue up an action and the bar has to go through and then it goes off and you
yeah.
just keep doing that. I mean, you do move around, but it really doesn't matter.
Hmm, hmm.
Like positioning is not a thing.
Right. And then 13, obviously I liked the battle system in 13, but it was a
Yeah,
very
13
big
has a good battle
departure,
system.
with the paradigm system and everything. It was very different. And then 14 obviously is online. And then 15 was the first time they went action based, really. And so I don't understand all the commentary about, oh, 16 has changed to an action based for. No, they didn't change. 15 was action based, and it wasn't.
It's refined now,
It's
is what it
refined now.
is.
Exactly. It feels so much better now, I think.
But then you'll have people argue, oh, but 15 at least has party members.
I
But
guess if you insist on putting it that way.
yeah.
Yeah. So, um, let's see
Oh,
what.
something I do want to just jump in with,
Mhm.
that's probably not on your list of things to
That's
talk
fine.
about.
Yeah.
The voice acting is so good in this game,
Oh yeah, the voice acting's
and
great.
the
And I love
voice
we
actors
haven't talked
are
enough about how great Sid is. Original Sid is.
oh,
He's such
well,
a good character. Like I just want to
yeah,
put that
he's
out there.
pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, he's not like at the top for me or anything, but
Mm, a hater.
the voice actors, especially Clive and Dion's voice actors, they're very like active within the Final Fantasy community now, and
Mhm.
they are amazing.
Yeah,
Like they're
they're
just
great.
so funny, and they're down for anything. They'll read in, Clive and
Oh
Dion's
yeah, yeah.
voices, and it's just so
Is that,
funny.
I'd like 2 tickets to Bobby, please. Like
Yeah,
all the it's so good. Yeah, it's funny.
yeah. So I'm so glad at least those two are cast because
Well,
they have been like a ray of sunlight through like people complaining about things with this game
and
because they really seem to care.
another reason why I'd love to see Final Fantasy 16 too is that a lot of these people would come back. And look,
Well,
if
they can't if
well,
it's
hold
off
up,
the
because
ending.
Titus in 10-2 still had a way of showing up in there. So there's things they could do. Flashback scenes, there's stuff they could do if they wanted to.
Maybe so.
Maybe. Let's see. What else should I ask you about? So you mentioned one of the downsides for you being the soundtrack, and we all know that
Uh-huh.
we've been singing Soken's praises for years now because of Final Fantasy 14. I don't know. I agree that the soundtrack was a little bit of a letdown, but I think we may have ourselves to blame a little bit, that maybe we hyped it up almost a little too much, if you know what I mean?
No.
That like the
Nope.
expectations were a little high. Oh,
I disagree.
okay.
Okay, so I just pulled up my iTunes because that's where I have the soundtrack right now,
Mhm.
very illegally. Um, there are 181 songs on here, and I can tell you what like 6 of them are.
Yeah.
That's it. The soundtrack is the lowest point in a Final Fantasy game to me in a long time. And I just went back through I did 1 through 5. I played some of 6. I'm always playing 14. I in the past few years have gone through 12. Stranger of Paradise, uh 7 remake. I did all that. Like all of those have really memorable soundtracks to me. This one is just boring. It is so boring.
I would say a lot of filler content and songs, which it's okay sometimes for the music to be in the background. And I think I'm not sure I'm as sour on it as you, but I would agree with the part where you said there's 180 songs in the soundtrack. I can name maybe 6. But I think the songs that you do recall, at least for me, are really, really good. Like the
Yeah.
Titan fight song was great. And I
Well,
think that
there's like 3 songs for that. So that's half of the songs I know.
well, and I think the times that they incorporate the classic Final Fantasy songs are when the soundtrack really shines. Like Soken is a great Uematsu remixer, like the best. Like the classic Final Fantasy the crystal theme, and the way they kind of use it in this game, and it's more like dramatic. It's basically the crystal theme drama version is what I would call. I don't know the actual name of the song on the soundtrack, but I would say it's crystal theme drama version. And I think they use that song very well. I think it's probably one of the better songs in the game. But I think about, and maybe it's because I've been streaming a lot of Final Fantasy Theatrhythm lately. Like, what songs from this game would I like to see in Theatrhythm?
I would like
The
the
song I
main
just
battle theme.
referenced. Yeah.
The main battle theme is actually really good.
Mhm.
Honestly, like it's catchy, it sticks with you. Fantastic song. 2 of the Titan songs I would say deserve to go in there. The Bahamut song is good, and Another song I really like is the overworld theme for Waloed.
Okay.
And I also like Dollar Mill.
Hmm.
Those songs I'd be super happy with. Anything else, I'd be like, oh, this is from 16. I don't remember it.
Yeah. Um. What else I
I
want to?
think
Oh.
also a problem with the 16 soundtrack, and Soken kind of admitted this at one point,
Hmm.
and I think in an interview, is that there are some recycled themes from 14 just randomly in there.
Hmm.
And he's like, yeah, it probably wasn't on purpose. I'm like, okay, so he's making like some of the same songs. Like Dolomil, I like it because it's like the same song as the music from, oh god, Amarot.
Mm.
The zone for Amarot, I forget what that one's called.
Mm.
It's but the song's called like "Neath the Waves." And when you go to, which dungeon is it? Uh oh, it's the island that where Jill was kidnapped
Hmm.
for a long time. When you go to that area and you finally get to like this cathedral-y looking place and you have to fight like the blue dragon, that sounds like the vault or anything in Ishgard.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of funny to me. It's like it's just a lot of recycled parts of songs from 14.
Let me ask this as kind of like a last question, and then any other thoughts on the game that you want to get out, you sure can. But
Oh, there's a whole bunch still.
all right. Well, well, what do you want to talk about then?
Let's talk about the ending.
Okay.
Because oh no, I kind of want to talk about something, but it's gonna be a spoiler for you
It's fine. I know it's a
at
spoiler
this
cast
point.
at this point.
Okay,
Yeah, it's fine.
the side characters, the three, I would say about maybe three or four. There's like quest hubs almost in the world.
Hmm.
There's the one with the Dame. There's Martha's Rest.
Hmm.
There's Theo and his sister, and there's Dalamil, and then there's, oh, I don't remember the guy's name, but he's like the first one you go to where he has that like town full of uh bearers,
Hmm.
and he's got like the little
Oh,
apron on.
Quentin, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Quinn. Okay, so they were like the major NPCs you dealt with in the world. Um, what did you think about each of their storylines? And did you complete any of them?
I think I did because there was one where like I tried to
Okay,
do in the
let's
in
start with Martha's Rest. We'll just kind of go in a circle here.
I
That one ends with the like Wade establishing a town for those
Oh yeah, I remember that.
those
Yeah. Hmm.
soldiers.
Hmm.
Okay, so what do you think about that one?
I
Okay,
it's
you
it's
don't.
been a
Okay,
minute. I
yeah.
don't remember all the details. Sorry. So just go ahead.
Okay, that's
I'll
fine.
jump in when I have something to
Quentin
say.
Quentin's story was interesting. How he made that town as a revenge like city against one person in Sanbreque, and that revenge drove him to lose basically everybody in the town, but they still like supported him. That was a neat storyline.
Hmm.
Um, I love Lubor. Like, so Dalamil's great. Finding out that he is a bearer was really cool. And then him being shunned for it, even though he had been like running and keeping the town alive. But then them coming around and realizing, well, he's actually just a person. We shouldn't do that. It's a pretty good storyline.
Hmm.
Um, Theo and his sister. I hate that one just because of the way it ends.
I
But
have
it was
been
pretty
spoiled
good.
on that through social media. I feel like you're trying so hard to hide what happens there. Social
Oh
media ruined
no,
that for
okay,
me.
yeah. Theo becomes a Kashik and actually like kind of keeps himself for a few seconds, but then he dies. And so, what's even the point of the rest of that storyline?
Yeah, I
Um,
was disappointed to hear that Theo is gone too. It's irritating.
and then the last one, the Dame storyline. Um, that was fine. I like that she she guided the people of Sambrek in that area towards rebuilding, but not rebuilding in the same image of Sambrek.
Hmm.
So that was pretty good. So I mean, those were the major storylines in this game that were not the main story.
Well,
So
can I just say really quick, as far
yeah,
as like, side, adventures and so forth, I felt some of the really great side quests were kind of before the time skip that happens in the game. Like there is some incredible stuff. Like remember the kid ones where like you find out with
yes,
these horrible, horrible children. And there's like the one quest where like it's him and his dad or so. It's so disgusting, but it's such good like world building stuff, right? Like
yes.
this game gets you to hate kids that you would think otherwise, like, wait a minute, but these kids were really, truly awful. Like,
Well, that's why I like the side story,
yeah,
like
no,
quests, and
no.
like all the side quests because they all are in service
I wouldn't
of
say they
building the
all are.
world story.
Some were very like,
No,
go get 3 roses, and maybe
yes,
it's
but
leading to something else, but yeah.
well, yeah, well, maybe not the actions you take, but the quest itself is in service of building the world. There was
Yeah.
nothing that was like, I need to make a shoes and that's it. I just want to make some shoes, so go get me these things. No, if I'm going to make shoes, I'm going to tell you why they're important, why like this animal is important to the ecology, and these shoes are going to lead to a revolution in this small city at some
Hmm.
point. So I thought that was great.
Yeah.
I thought major icon battles were fantastic because we didn't
Hmm.
really talk about them. The only one I ever had trouble with was uh, Odin. I did.
Hmm.
I technically died, but I had a potion that just brought me right back to life.
Convenient.
Um,
I just want to point out this battle thing I just did, this arcade mode, is the first time I've ever done the battle without assist. Now, granted, I'm doing the easiest one, but I'm still like, wow, I actually am kind of able to keep up with it better than I thought I would.
yeah,
It's the
I think
easiest
it's really
one.
fun.
I'll be the first to admit, but
Well,
I'm
and
still
once you
doing all right.
get like once you learn how to dodge and stuff, like without the game doing it for you, it's actually like you start to feel that rhythm, and it's pretty fun.
Well, remember, I didn't have the game
Um,
do it for me. I love the timely, and there
yeah,
was a certain
yeah.
style to that I really love too, to be honest.
We've gone this entire time without even talking about Ultima, which is funny. We
Oh,
just
terrible
I
villain. I'm sorry. I'm
his
so.
story was
Oh,
fine.
yeah. Oh, no,
His
I'm so glad you brought it up. No, I have to say something, Shane. I'm sorry. He is a terrible villain, and so is Barnabas. You know why they were terrible villains? Because Clive's mother
oh
is
yeah, she was the best
probably the
villain.
most heinous villain ever in a Final Fantasy game, even above Kefka for me. And so the way that her story kind of ended, I was like, oh, all right, well, I'm glad she got hers, but it was kind of like I kind of expected that would be like a much bigger moment and bigger thing when it happened because like no, seriously, she is awful.
Yeah,
And
she was
she was a way and
terrible.
she was just such a better villain than like, yes, it is my world to reclaim and never, that I was like I didn't care for the villain as much.
I don't think he's like the best all-time villain by any means, but I think in the service of the story, he was fine.
I
His
guess.
motives were clear enough by the time they outlined them.
Hmm.
Um, so he was fine. I'm trying to think. His fights were easy, like very easy. They
Hmm.
were not a problem at all. They were cool because like you had little moments where he would use an icon ability and then you would match it. Those were like the quick time events. Those were fun.
Hmm.
Um, I think then after that, uh, the ending. So the ending that the game gives you, the general consensus is you don't take it at face value, and if you do all the side quests, you gain an entirely different understanding from the ending, because in
Mm.
the end of the game,
Yeah, because
Ultima,
I'll say I did not do all of the side quests before beating the game because I was like, I'm gonna get spoiled on
did
this if I
you
just don't beat it. So I
did
went
you
and I beat it.
read? did you read the kind of what you're supposed to take away from the side quest and apply to the ending? Because then you can
No.
talk about, if you didn't, then talk about your interpretation of the ending, and then
Well,
I'll talk about what the
it's
like overall theory
it's
is.
been a minute now, but I don't know, I just kind of took it as like, okay, that is the, end of his story and so forth, and now it's like, the future generations are singing the praises of what happened and so forth. And yeah, I don't know, but I was more like like thinking about, because my mind is so, I guess, far set on a sequel, thinking about like, oh, what's going to happen with Dion, or which of these characters are going to, continue on and go through. So I mean, Clive dying was or I guess I don't know. Some could argue that, like, maybe, like, especially if you look at a game like Final Fantasy 13 or something, like maybe turning to crystal means something different, or that. But I'm not sure that's what I think. I'm overthinking it when I bring that up. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot of complex thoughts. I just remember I didn't hate the ending, which, there some Final Fantasy games have bad endings. Like Final Fantasy 7 has a bad ending. But I didn't think it was bad.
No, Final Fantasy VII had a good ending until they started adding other things to it, because it was easy to interpret the ending as the world started over entirely.
Mm,
Because all the ending is like you see Midgar covered in vines, and then you see like Red 13 babies, and that's it. You don't see people.
right.
And the last thing before that is like all of the live stream like coming up. So that was a great ending until they're like, okay, well, here's Advent Children, here's Crisis Core, here's all the 15,000 other spin-offs. So not to talk about 7, but I'm kind of excited about like where the remake is
No,
going
I'm
because
definitely
of that.
excited about the remake as well. Like, it's just because it's going to be different. But anyway, I digress. I'm curious to hear your thoughts and on the ending, and like what you have put together with all
So
the side quests and internet
the
stuff.
ending, as face value, is that Joshua dies from Ultima coming out of him. Clive beats Ultima. Um, Clive destroys Origin and winds up on a beach. His hand turns to stone, and he dies because, like, Jill saw a star go out, the moon Dalamud, basically, because I will forever just like conspiracy theory that this is a shard in 14. Um, and then it jumps forward in time, and you see kids playing, and there's a book called Final Fantasy. It's written by Joshua. So, oh yeah, and then you see Clive before he destroys Origin after he beats Ultima. Like, you see Joshua's body all bloody, and then Clive looks like he's healing him. So you would assume from that ending he healed Joshua, Clive dies, Joshua writes this book at some point, and this is the future.
Mm.
The theory, if you do all the side quests and pay attention to some extra things like the lyrics to the last song, um, is that Joshua dies, does not come back. Clive has been narrating this story the whole time. The lyrics talk about Clive being okay in the end, and he took on Joshua's name like he took on Sid's name and wrote this book. So Clive lives,
Oh, interesting.
but the world is still depleted of magic by whatever point in the time that that ending happens, because like that's what they said would happen too,
Hmm.
is that the world would lose magic. The mom doesn't know anything about magic in the end. The kids are just like playing on whatever's going on in that book. So that's why it makes it kind of hard, I guess, for a sequel, depending on a lot of factors. But I mean, there's no more magic. Magic doesn't come back at any point that we're aware of. Clive's still alive, but he's
There's
also
still a
one. He's got
lot
one stone hand.
there's a lot that could have happened between that and the flash forward scene or whatever that was. I still
True.
feel like there's other timelines and things they could tell, or concurrent stories. What else is going on at the same time. This that there's other ways to explore the world still. Um,
Well,
I,
and they really drive it home that for some reason this continent you're on is the only living surviving continent on this planet.
Mhm.
So if you're not, I don't know. It's who knows what could happen. I guess
Yeah.
it just doesn't seem very likely, even though it would be fun.
What about, we keep saying sequel, but I think a lot of the mass gaming media is asking a much, simpler question in some ways about DLC, which I'm kind of like, I thought they made kind of clear they didn't build this game to have DLC, although there is a very obvious opportunity with Leviathan and that whole
Leviathan the
thing.
Lost.
Yeah.
Um, I would be fine with DLC. I don't know how you would slot it in the story.
Yeah. It would be
Just
weird, but
because, especially because they call Leviathan the Lost, the final battle, Ultima never uses Leviathan against you. So I don't know how they would do it. I I would technically like it, but I'm also fine if they don't, because then I already have the complete package of the game.
mhm,
Like it's just one and done.
yeah. I would rather see just a sequel than, and there's ways to do it than DLC, I think. But if DLC comes out for this game, I'm probably going to buy it. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would in a heartbeat. And I have to say, I love the ending, the flashbacks. Like, oh, that's the quickest way for me to like start crying in this game. They're
Mm,
so good
mm,
because it's all about like Joshua and Clive, and it's just really sad and touching. And then
mhm,
it's so good.
yeah. Again, but that's also another reason why I feel like Clive didn't really need a love interest when it was, really about him and his brother at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It's not necessary to the story in any way. It didn't help either character, honestly.
Right.
Um, but it's just like it's what they chose to
Yeah.
do. So okay, that's the story we got.
Yep. This is the question I wanted to ask you to kind of wrap things up, and that would be, where do you ultimately, you said this is a 10 out of 10 game for you.
Yes.
I don't know if I would go as high as say 10 out of 10, but I certainly liked it an awful lot. Like just especially like the game, enough of the story was really engaging that I wanted to get all the way through and all that. I don't know. I'd say probably 9, maybe 8.5, worst case scenario, depending on what part of the game I'm currently at. Um, but where do you think this ranks among the other Final Fantasy games?
It's so I've ranked all the Final Fantasies before, but it gets tricky when you add in 11 and 14.
Mhm.
It's very hard to be like, well, 14 is clearly the best. I played it the most, but it's also got like 5 expansions, and so do you
Right.
take those individually? So I tend to keep 11 and 14 just out of my rankings entirely.
Okay, but still
Um,
amongst the others.
so so it's in my top 3 easily.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's one. I kind of feel like it honestly might be. Um, but my top 3 are 12, 5, and this game. And that's not to diminish any other games except for 2 and 15 because I hate those.
Hmm.
But um, those for me it comes down to like story and the battle system, and I think those 3 have the best for both of those. Like if you take them together, like 5 story is pretty good, but like the battle system in 5 is great, and 12, its story is fantastic up to a point and then just really loses itself, but the combat is really
Yeah, the
fun, so
combat
it
is
keeps
so
you
good. But
going.
that's kind of like this game too, right?
Well, to me, the story never lost itself in
Yeah,
this
I
game.
get
That's
okay,
why
yeah.
it's like this
But I
might be
meant
number one because
yeah, the combat.
I love the combat and I never got tired of the story. Like it just was a great ride from start to end for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to really sit down, and maybe that's the topic of a future stream, is to do the Final Fantasy tier rankings. I would say definitely for me, 4 and 6 are like the ultimate Final Fantasy games for me, and this does certainly doesn't.
When's the last time you played 4? Because literally, I just went through that a few months ago. It does not hold up.
I don't know about that. I went through 4 when the Pixel remaster first came out on PC because it was the only Pixel remaster that I bought. Because
Oh,
I didn't, yeah, I knew the others would come out on console eventually, basically. So I
Like the combat is fine, but man, that story
well,
is
but I also kind of say, okay, but for its time, what the story is, you know what I mean? Like, I don't necessarily say, oh, the story is bad because I'm putting it in, what video games can do today with the cinematics and the different ways to
well, it's
tell a
not even the
story.
cinematics. I just think it's like
It is very trope, I guess, but for me, it invented it, you know? But
maybe.
we can talk about that on a tier ranking
Yeah.
stream sometime.
Yeah.
But I would say 16 is definitely in the top half. Oh, look at that. I got mostly S's, but 2 C's. That's actually the first time I've ever done arcade mode. And keep in mind, I'm playing with no audio right now. What is all this? Accolades.
I've
I
never
have
played
never done
arcade
this
mode.
mode. All right, I'm learning
You're a
something new.
champion. There you
Woohoo! I'm a
go.
champion. Woo. Um, but I would say I think I may I'd have to really sit down and think about 12, 10, and this game. But all those are and 7
7
maybe.
remake is really good. 7
Yeah, but
remake probably
not counting the remake for me.
oh, if you don't count the remake, 7 is still pretty good.
Yeah, 7's still pretty good so it's somewhere in there, but I would say for me, I like it better than 9, certainly 8, probably even like 5. I like 5, but I'd say this is just a really good game, so yeah, I it's definitely in my top half. Probably I would go so far as say probably top 5, but about 5, 4 or 5 for me. So, um okay, I guess that was all the questions I had. And I don't see any questions in our chat room as we're doing this live. Maybe we'll get some stuff over on our website. You can always, send us an email or anything. Send us on Twitter or Blue Sky at VOG Network if you have any feedback. Or I guess leave a comment on YouTube. There's always that too. But Shane, any other like last thoughts you want to get out about this game before we wrap it up?
No, it's a fantastic game.
Mhm.
I just it was I'm not sure it'll be game of the year for me. There are a lot of good games this
This
year,
is a
and it's
hard year.
ridiculous.
Between Tears of the Kingdom,
Nope,
this.
that's a crappy game.
el-
Sorry, that's awful.
Oh, okay, you can own that
Yeah,
comment. A
yeah, I
lot,
will. I don't like it.
a lot of people are very hyped for Starfield. I know you're not one of them, but that
Nope,
doesn't
but I
mean.
am playing Baldur's Gate, and
And that's
I was
another one
gonna say
now. Baldur's
I was
Gate
gonna
is one of
say
them.
I've only played a little bit of Baldur's Gate, but I love that soundtrack way more so far.
So this is a very like on Diablo 4 for me. I don't think it's gonna hold the. I think. Oh, oh my thing was freezing up for a minute there. It was very strange to me. Sorry, I don't know what that was. But Diablo 4 to me was also really good. But I think all the inertia Diablo 4 had just plummeted completely
Oh
for a
yeah.
lot of people.
And
So
then like today was Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, and that's like the indie game of this year that people are looking at.
oh yeah.
The Jet Set Radio game, which apparently is fantastic and
So it is
runs at 60 frames on the Switch.
it's gonna be a hard year for a game like this to stand out. It really
And the
is.
Mortal Kombat beta was really good.
Yeah. So but
And we got Mario RPG and Mario Wonder and new Detective Pikachu. This game or this year is just too much.
But if you own a PlayStation 5, you really should pick up this game, which there's a whole
Yes.
other video we could do about Square's comments on the sale or the media's comments on Square's update to the investors on the sales again, all this stuff, and how they kind of know that they were holding back the sales by releasing it on PlayStation 5. We've got to be seeing a PC version sooner rather than later. I'm surprised we don't already have it confirmed for this holiday, but maybe they're gonna let the PlayStation 5 and Final Fantasy 16 kind of have this holiday, and then in January they'll announce the PC version for summer or something like that. It's kind of my guess.
Maybe.
We'll
Or it
see.
just stays here forever.
But mods are gonna make it that much more fun. All right. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching this whole thing. Really appreciate it. Thanks for going down Final Fantasy 16 discussion with us. Plenty more discussion like this and more over at the Voice of Geeks Network, vognetwork.com, on Twitch and YouTube at VOG Network, and most social networks as well. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.